goddess of destruction.
And healing?
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a figure just incredibly powerful, really fearsome, someone whose anger could, well, nearly wipe humanity off the map.
A deity whose breath was literally the scorching desert wind.
Yeah, and whose presence brought plague. But then, here's the twist, right? That same terrifying force was also the one you'd turn to for healing. The patron of doctors.
It's one of the most striking examples of duality you find in ancient pantheons. Really reflects a world where, the same forces could bring devastation and life.
And today, we're doing a deep dive into the goddess who just embodied this paradox.
Exactly.
Based on the sources you shared, the articles, research notes, historical accounts, she's shown as a lion-headed woman, just radiating immense power.
Right, and her name actually comes from Sekhmet. That's the Egyptian word for power or might.
So it often gets translated pretty simply as the powerful one.
Makes sense, doesn't it? And our mission, really, with this deep dive is to try and understand that power. We're looking at her as the fierce warrior, the destructive eye of Ra, the bringer of pestilence.
But crucially, also as the goddess of medicine. The one who could ward off disease or even cure it.
It's that balance or maybe tension we want to explore.
It's a fascinating contradiction, really. How could one deity hold both those roles? So we're going to explore the myths, delve into the history of her worship.
And uncover what this incredibly complex figure meant to the ancient Egyptians, all guided by what these sources are telling us.
Right. Let's jump right in. Where do we start? Her origin.
Yeah, good place. At her core, Sekhmet is, she's a manifestation of the sun god Ra's power.
Okay.
The sources identify her specifically as his daughter, and crucially, the embodiment of the Eye of Ra.
Which is a huge deal in Egyptian myth, right? That eye.
Oh, absolutely. A really potent symbol of divine authority and often divine vengeance.
And that leads us straight into the myth of her rampage, which is just extraordinary.
It really is.
The material mentions that Ra became, let's say, displeased with humanity.
Right. Some accounts say people were plotting against him. Others suggest humanity just wasn't upholding Ma anymore. That fundamental principle of truth, balance, cosmic order.
So the big boss god decides we need a harsh lesson.
A very harsh lesson. He sends Hathor, another really powerful goddess, often linked with love and beauty, but she has a vengeful side too.
Right.
He sends her down to Earth, and she transforms, or maybe just becomes, the fearsome Sekhmet.
Her mission? Punish humanity. Simple as that.
And she did that with terrifying efficiency. The sources describe her just going on this violent rampage across Egypt.
Pure bloodlust.
Completely insatiable, and she's directly linked to causing plagues. They're even called her servants or her messengers.
Wow.
Think about the descriptions, her hot breath being the simum, that scorching desert wind. Some say she breathed fire.
So she was totally consumed by this fury. It wasn't just punishment anymore. It was like annihilation.
Exactly. She's basically wiping humanity out.
It's a striking image, isn't it? Divine power unleashed almost.
Yeah.
Out of control.
Completely. And the sources note that even Ra, who sent her, watching the scale of destruction, he became horrified.
Even he thought it went too far.
Yeah. He realized the punishment was, overdone. He needed to stop her before she finished the job and annihilated everyone.
Okay, so how do you stop an unstoppable divine force that's basically drunk on bloodlust?
Well, the myth takes a really surprising turn here. Ra and the other gods, they had to get creative.
I bet.
One version focuses on Ra. Others mention the wisdom god Thoth playing a key role, maybe persuading her. But the core plan, brewing vast quantities of beer.
Beer. Not exactly the weapon I'd expect.
No, truly massive amounts. And then they dyed it red.
To look like.
Blood, exactly. The material specifically mentions using red ochre, that pigment from the desert earth, or even pomegranate juice.
Ah, clever. The ultimate deception.
Right, and they poured this crimson liquid all across the land, created these huge pools, these lakes of what looked exactly like her favorite drink.
And she fell for it.
Hook, line, and sinker. In her frenzy, she saw the red pools, assumed it was blood, and just started drinking greedily.
Drank it all.
Consumed volume upon volume. But, of course...
Well, blood, it was beer.
Exactly. So she didn't get more bloodthirsty. She got incredibly, completely drunk.
Drunk enough to forget about killing everyone.
That's what the sources tell us. Her intoxication was so profound that her rage just subsided. The bloodlust vanished. She simply gave up the slaughter.
And then what? Just went home.
Returned peacefully to Ra, her destructive mission totally abandoned.
Wow. So humanity is saved, Ma'at is restored, because a goddess got hammered on red beer.
Pretty much. It's quite an origin story, isn't it? Getting tipsy saves the world.
Which just makes that paradox of her nature even more intriguing. This deity of, like, horrific destruction is also tied to preservation.
And well-being. That's the really fascinating part.
Yeah, that's the bit I find so compelling. Despite being the terrifying Red Lady, or the Lady of Pestilence, linked with death and the harshness of the desert.
Right, the dangerous aspect.
Yeah. The material you provided strongly links Sekhmet to medicine, to healing.
It's not just that she could cause disease. She was also believed to have the power to ward it off and to cure it.
So it wasn't contradictory for them.
Apparently not. It seems they saw it as two sides of the same, immensely powerful coin, a force that had to be respected in both its destructive and protective aspects.
And this is reflected in her priests. They weren't just religious figures.
No, they were highly regarded as skilled doctors. The sources are clear on this. They performed protective rituals, yes, but they also administered actual medical treatments.
So the very deity who could send the plague
Was precisely the one whose priests you'd seek out to get better. It makes sense when you think about it. Who better to appease or ask for relief from disease than the one who controls it?
She really was the Lady of Pestilence and the Lady of Life. Both titles fit.
Perfectly. And her place in the wider pantheon also shows how significant she was.
Right, she wasn't isolated. Who was she connected to?
Well, she's often described as the consort of Ptah, the great creator god of Memphis,
Okay, a major pairing.
and the mother of Nefertum. He's associated with healing, perfumes, the blue lotus flower itself, a symbol of rebirth and healing.
So a healing connection through her son, too.
Yes, and she's also linked to Mahez, a lion-headed war god, which, given her own martial aspect, makes perfect sense.
A powerful family. And what about Bastet? You often see them together.
Ah, Bastet, the cat goddess. Yes, the research suggests they were seen as counterparts, maybe even two aspects of the same divine force, embodying that Egyptian love of duality.
How so?
Sekhmet, the fierce lioness, often linked geographically to Upper Egypt, the south, and Bastet, the more gentle domestic cat protector, associated with Lower Egypt, the north.
Wild and tame, almost.
Something like that. And of course, as the myth showed, that deep connection to Hathor. Some texts almost treat them as interchangeable, or Hathor specifically transforming into Sekhmet for that mission.
It really highlights how central she was to their whole system of belief.
Absolutely. And this is vividly demonstrated by the sheer scale of her worship. That myth we talked about, her pacification by beer.
Yeah.
It was commemorated every year. A major festival. The Festival of Intoxication.
You're kidding. A festival based on getting the goddess drunk so she wouldn't kill everyone.
That seems to be the idea. The sources indicate it was held right at the beginning of the year, perhaps to, soothe her potentially destructive power for the year ahead.
And people actually reenacted it.
They ritually drank large amounts of beer and wine. It seems they were honoring, or maybe imitating, that original drunkenness that stopped her rampage and saved humanity.
That must have been some party. Is there actual evidence for this?
Oh, yes. The archaeological evidence is quite extensive. Betsy Bryan's work, for instance, at the Temple of Mut in Luxor.
Mut, another goddess.
Yes, a consort of Amun-Ra. Mut actually absorbed some of Sekhmet's characteristics, especially when Thebes rose to prominence. Anyway, Bryan's team uncovered what they called a porch of drunkenness. Seriously. They found illustrations showing priestesses heavily involved, maybe even leading the rites, and evidence of attendants helping participants who were feeling the effects.
Wow.
It suggests this wasn't some small cultic thing. It was a major widespread event, possibly involving tens of thousands of people just in that one temple precinct.
That's incredible, and it speaks to how important she was, right? The sheer number of statues found.
It's astounding. The sources mention around 700 statues of Sekhmet commissioned just for one pharaoh's mortuary temple, Amenhotep III.
700. Just for one temple.
Just for one. And hundreds more found in Mut's temple complex at Karnak. There's a theory they might have intended one for every single day of the year.
For daily offerings. To keep her calm.
Possibly. To appease her, make daily offerings. It shows she wasn't some fringe deity. She was absolutely central to Egyptian religion, especially during the New Kingdom.
And her connection to kingship wasn't just symbolic, was it?
No, it was deeply ingrained. Early texts, like the pyramid texts, even suggest the pharaoh was conceived by Sekhmet.
Wow, divine parenting.
Later reliefs, you can see them in temples like Seti Suckards at Abydos, actually depict the pharaoh being suckled by Sekhmet, or sometimes Hathor in her form. It's a very visual way of linking the king's legitimacy, his power, directly to the goddess.
So the king draws strength and authority from her.
Exactly. And pharaohs definitely used her image to project their own might. Ramses II is a prime example.
The great builder.
And warrior. He adopted Sekhmet as a symbol of his power in battle. You see it in the famous friezes depicting the Battle of Kadesh.
What do they show?
They show Sekhmet right there alongside him, her fiery breath just decimating his enemies. She was the ultimate symbol of divine destructive power, and kings absolutely wanted that associated with them.
Makes sense for a warrior king. Did she have her own major temples too?
Oh, yes. We know she had a major temple at a place called Teremu in the Nile Delta.
Yeah.
The Greeks later called it Leontopolis.
Leontopolis, city of lions. Apt.
Very apt.
Now, you mentioned something about comparisons to other myths, other goddesses.
Yes, it's quite interesting. Some comparative religious scholars have noted parallels between the Sekhmet myth, the rampage, the bloodlust stopped by a trick involving drink, and myths surrounding the Hindu goddess Kali.
Kali, how so?
Well, Kali is known for her intense battle fury, her own kind of divine frenzy. And in one major story, she's eventually calmed when her consort, Shiva, lies down beneath her feet, stopping her destructive dance.
Huh. So different method, but similar theme. Powerful, divine, female, destructive frenzy stopped by an intervention.
Exactly. And both goddesses have associations with blood, Sekhmet drinking the fake blood. Kali often depicted wearing skulls or drinking blood. It might suggest some ancient cultural exchange or perhaps just common human ways of wrestling with these ideas of overwhelming divine force and the need for balance.
That's fascinating, whether there was a direct link or not.
It highlights these powerful archetypes, doesn't it? These recurring patterns in how humans understand the divine.
Absolutely. And Sekhmet's veneration, it wasn't just a phase, was it? It lasted.
Oh, it spanned basically the entire history of ancient Egyptian civilization, thousands of years. And she even finds resonance today among some modern pagan groups.
Still powerful.
She remains an incredibly potent symbol. Sekhmet just embodies that raw, dualistic nature of power itself.
Its capacity for terrifying destruction.
And its vital role in healing, in maintaining order. Her story, especially that central myth of the rampage and being calmed, it feels like the ancient Egyptians' way of grappling with and making sense of the most fearsome forces in their world.
Like plague, the scorching sun, warfare.
Exactly. And recognizing that these forces, these powers, often held the potential for both harm and necessary restoration, or at least that they had to be managed, appeased.
So looking at Sekhmet isn't just about seeing a scary lion goddess with a drinking problem.
Not at all. It's about understanding how an ancient culture perceived the world, how they saw these interconnected, often contradictory forces of life and death, sickness and health, chaos and order.
A truly profound figure, then. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've covered quite a bit. Her explosive origin as the Eye of Ra, that near-apocalyptic rampage.
She was stopped by essentially a divine beer party.
Right. And her surprising, yet absolutely crucial role as a healer. A goddess of terrifying power, yet somehow fundamentally tied to preserving Ma'at that balanced the Egyptians held so dear.
And the sheer weight of archaeological evidence, those hundreds, even thousands of statues, the festival sites, it just speaks volumes about how important she was, a force both deeply feared and utterly relied upon.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Sekhmet, here's something to think about. That story, her being calmed by beer to restore balance, it feels like there's a powerful ancient metaphor. What can it maybe teach us about the necessity of finding equilibrium even when we're faced with overwhelming forces, whether it's destruction or chaos in the world or even within ourselves?
And how does this ancient culture's way of personifying both disease and healing in one single powerful deity? How does that reflect their lived reality, their understanding of a world that could be both nurturing and incredibly dangerous?
Yeah, and how does that ancient duality resonate today? How do we understand forces of destruction and healing now? Definitely something to mull over long after the rampage has subsided.